A snowy path, a quiet house, no flags, no cameras, just a kettle whistling in a borrowed kitchen and two delegations who weren't supposed to meet. They take off their coats, shake hands with the awkwardness of sworn rivals, and sit, close enough to hear each other breathe. In that small Norwegian room, far from the Middle East and even farther from the headlines, a conversation begins that will rewrite history and give the world one of the most famous handshakes ever seen. This is the story of how a small Nordic country, known for fjords, fishing, and fairness, helped midwife the most audacious peace experiment between Israelis and Palestinians. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on Norway's secret role, the Backchannel it built, the trust it banked, the risks it took, and why that quiet diplomacy still matters now. Why Norway? If you're asking why Norway of all places, that question is exactly the point. Norway isn't a superpower. It has no army marching across borders and no empire to defend. What it did have in the early 1990s was a reputation for neutrality, a habit of funding humanitarian work, and a foreign policy willing to do careful, unglamorous listening. That combination let Norwegians float a daring idea. Take the hottest conflict on Earth and move the conversation to a calm, private room where people could think before they performed. Norwegian officials and a handful of non-governmental partners believed that secrecy could lower the political temperature enough to test new trade-offs, without tabloids, talking points, or grandstanding. First, the timing. After the 1991 Madrid conference, the formal track in Washington stalled. Everyone was talking, but little was moving. That's when a different model started taking shape up north. A Norwegian research institute, FEFO, had been studying living conditions in the region. Its director, Terje Rød-Larsen, and Norwegian diplomat Mona Juul saw an opening. What if they could host confidential meetings, off the record, to explore compromises the formal negotiators couldn't risk in public? With support inside Norway's foreign ministry, particularly Jan Egeland, this Backchannel moved from idea to reality. By the time winter closed over Scandinavia, the first serious encounters were being arranged just outside Oslo. The goal wasn't to ink a final peace. It was to create enough human chemistry and conceptual clarity that the formal talks could finally budge. TheElders.org. They kept the teams small. They used first names. There were no podiums, no choreographed photo ops. The Norwegians, part facilitator, part host, focused on creating a space where each side could say the things they couldn't say at a microphone. Rød-Larsen and Juul handled logistics and tone. Senior Norwegian officials provided political air cover when needed. The meetings were quiet by design. Phone calls taken in corridors, notes scribbled over coffee, trust built in the time between formal sessions. This was the Oslo Channel, and it was the opposite of a summit. It was human-scale diplomacy. The setting mattered too. Holding talks in a peaceful, orderly environment sent a subtle message. It is possible to inhabit a different reality together. The point wasn't to pretend away hard issues, but to let negotiators examine those issues without the ambient noise of politics. And as the sessions accumulated, so did the breakthroughs, first on tone, then on text. What do you talk about when the cameras are gone? Legitimacy and security, borders and governance, recognition and renunciation. The secret channel's working assumption was that the endgame, a two-state reality with mutual recognition, required an interim stage. Build Palestinian self-rule in steps, build Israeli confidence in parallel, then move toward final status questions once the ground was steadier. That's the architecture that emerged in draft after draft. A declaration of principles that would recognize the other as a legitimate partner, outline phased self-government, and keep the process moving even if politics got rough. The Norwegian hosts kept shuttling messages, smoothing mistrust, and shepherding the text toward the moment when secrecy would flip into spectacle. On September 13, 1993, the world watched a sunlit ceremony at the White House. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Palestine Liberation Organization negotiator Mahmoud Abbas signed the Declaration of Principles, while Yasser Arafat and US President Bill Clinton looked on. In essence, Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. The PLO recognized Israel's right to exist and renounced terrorism, and both sides committed to a staged process of Palestinian self-government. The name of this experiment, Oslo, was itself a nod to the secret Norwegian channel that birthed it. For a brief moment, it felt like history could be steered. The famous Rabin-Arafat handshake became a symbol of what had seemed impossible. What the television cameras didn't show was the kettle and the quiet, the Norwegian choreography that made that handshake plausible. Norway didn't pack up after 1993. It took on the unglamorous, essential work of keeping institutions alive while politics zigzagged. As chair of the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee, AHLC, the International Donor Group for Palestine, Norway convened regular meetings in New York, Brussels, and Oslo to coordinate aid, nudge reforms, and try to keep the Palestinian Authority's basic functions from collapsing when talks faltered. It was part accountant, part coach, part emergency room. The idea was simple. A peace process cannot rest on words alone. It needs schools that open, salaries that clear, clinics that function. You don't get headlines for budget support, but you do get momentum, and momentum is oxygen for any negotiation. What Norway actually did. Let's be precise. Norway hosted and facilitated the secret Backchannel that produced the Declaration of Principles, provided political cover so informal talks could mature into official ones. Chaired the AHLC for decades, corralling donors and pushing for Palestinian institution building as a foundation for a negotiated two-state solution. This wasn't mediating with muscle, it was mediating with patience. The Norwegians rarely grabbed the steering wheel. They made sure there was still gas in the car. No honest story about Oslo is just triumph. Critics argue that the interim approach left core issues, Jerusalem, refugees, final borders, on the later pile for too long, allowing facts on the ground to harden. Others say asymmetry between the parties made equal negotiations misleading. Even some involved in the process have reflected on missing archives and the limits of secrecy in producing durable legitimacy. These critiques don't erase the achievement of opening a channel. They warn about the costs of living indefinitely in the corridor between interim and final. The lesson here isn't that secrecy is bad. It's that secrecy is a tool best used to unlock public bargains fast. When interim becomes indefinite, trust turns brittle. 3 decades later, Norway's role keeps evolving. In May 2024, the Norwegian government recognized the state of Palestine, explicitly framing the move as a way to salvage a viable two-state horizon during a time of war and unimaginable human loss. We must keep alive the only alternative that offers a political solution for Israelis and Palestinians alike, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre said, as Norway linked recognition with continued expectations for governance reforms and the rule of law. As of 2025, Norway continues to chair the AHLC and to argue, patiently, persistently, that state building and a negotiated two-state solution are inseparable. It's the long game again. Build capacity, build accountability, keep the diplomatic scaffolding from collapsing, and be ready if politics creates a new opening. There's a bigger story hiding in Norway's story. How small states can move big conflicts. Here's the blueprint Oslo sketched. 1. Neutral space. Host talks where the temperature is low and the dignity is high. 2. Tiny teams. Keep numbers small to keep trust big. 3. Interim steps. Build realities people can live with today while aiming at tomorrow. 4. Institutional backbone. Pair political promises with budgets, payrolls, and services because hope needs infrastructure. This is not soft power as a slogan. It's soft power as a daily practice. Coffee, calendars, and careful drafting. Imagine a winter morning in Norway, a thick coat of silence outside, a table inside with maps and legal pads. Delegates discuss security cooperation, municipal elections, crossings. Someone cracks a dry joke, everyone laughs, surprised at themselves. A Norwegian facilitator steers the talk back to the clause at hand. They haggle a verb, then a comma. At lunch, the conversation drifts into family, kids' ages, parents' health. Ordinary things that make enemies feel uncomfortably human. Those small scenes, too small for headlines, are where the Oslo channel did its work. Not by magic, not by naivete, but by creating hours and hours where imagination could briefly outrun fear. What went right and what didn't. What went right was the proof of concept. When adversaries sit in a protected space and speak plainly, they can produce political text that surprises the world. What didn't was the handoff from secrecy to public durability. Institutions struggled. Violence surged, politics hardened. The same privacy that protected early creativity could not protect the agreements from later storms. Norway's response was to keep tending the ecosystem. The donor meetings, the quiet phone calls, the posture of availability. Not as savior, Norway never pretended to be that, but as steward. Stewardship isn't glamorous, but it can be decisive when windows crack open. Why this story still matters. In an era of viral outrage, the Oslo Channel reads like a relic. People who disagree profoundly sitting in a room until they make progress. And yet, if any future breakthrough comes, it will almost certainly pass through a similar space. Private at first, then public, then codified with budgets and benchmarks. The question isn't whether secrecy is good or bad. It's whether secrecy is put to work quickly, with enough public buy-in and institutional muscle to survive the morning after. Norway's wager, then and now, is that small states can build the conditions where that kind of work becomes possible. It won't always succeed, but when it does, it can change the way we talk about the possible. Think back to that quiet Norwegian house. The kettle has stopped whistling. The pens are capped. The visitors pull on their coats, stepping back into a world that isn't yet ready to believe what just happened. Months later, the world will see the public handshake. But the true hinge of history was the private one that came first, the one that said, "Sit. Let's see where this can go." That's Norway's secret role. Not to own the story, but to open the room where a new chapter can be written. If this journey through Norway's hidden diplomacy surprised you, tell me in the comments. Do you think secret back channels help or hurt peace in the long run? And if a new channel opened today, what should it prioritize first? Security, elections, borders, or something else? Hit like if you learned something new, share this with a friend who loves global history, and subscribe for more deep dives into the quiet moments that shape loud headlines.